good to be here this morning. Let me just quickly introduce my wife, Lisa. Lisa, you want to say hello? You guys have a dangerous stage. I don't normally have problems with stages, but I do tend to walk around when I preach. Unfortunately, sometimes I walk when I pray with my eyes closed, and I've stepped right off of them sometimes. But I think I'll be all right. It's good to be with you this morning. My wife and I have been missionaries in Cambodia for 28 years, actually, total. We first arrived there in January of 1994. Cambodia is not a very large country, only about the size of the state of Oklahoma. We've got about 16 million people who live there. It is 95% Buddhist, less than 2% Christian. And it's had incredible suffering and changes over the last 50 years, everything from a civil war that started in the mid-'60s that led to the Khmer Rouge, a radical communist group that was in power for 3 years and killed a quarter of the population in a genocide in the mid-1970s, to a Vietnamese invasion in 1979 that extended the Civil War all the way out till 1999. And since 1999, an incredibly rapid-paced development and economic investment in the country that has led to a pace of change that really is destabilizing in many ways and is almost as harmful for people's for their mental health as a period of war and violence. So that today we have a population in Cambodia that over 47% have unresolved post-traumatic stress disorder. Over 40% have major anxiety disorders, 11% clinical depression. Suicide is off the charts. I mean, you go on and on and on. And those aren't things that are going to be fixed by, a new mall being built down the street or better electricity service and those kind of things. They're not problems that are going to be fixed in the natural. But we do serve a God who works in the supernatural. God has done incredible things there during our time in Cambodia. When we first went in 1994, there were only about 140 evangelical churches in the country. Today, there are almost 4,000 churches in Cambodia. God's doing great things there, but there's still so much left to do. Like I said, it's still 95% Buddhist, less than 2% Christian. It's a country that there are places that have really never had an adequate gospel witness ever. My wife and I have worked in a number of different areas over the years since we first arrived. When we first went, we ran an orphanage of about 120 kids. We've done church planting in an island in the Mekong River. We've done media ministries for the last 20-some years that involve everything from full-length evangelistic films released in theaters there to children's animated programs on TV, children's radio programs, discipleship curriculums, distance education programs for local Bible colleges. You name it, we've probably done it at some point or another. We do a lot of training for new missionaries coming out, a lot of leadership development, and coming up now, when we return to Cambodia in April, we have a new thing that we're going to be involved with that we're really excited about. We're going to, about 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years, it's October, in October it'll be 2 years ago, the national church leadership, the Cambodian Assemblies of God, came to us and said, hey, we've got a goal. We want to see a strong Cambodian church in each one of our provincial capitals, and we have 25 provinces. There's less than half of them currently that have an Assemblies of God work in those provinces, so half the country is still unreached. And they said, we want to have a strong church in there. We want to partner with you to plant these churches. And we said, great, how do you want to do it? They said, we have no idea. That's why we came to you. And so we are heading up a new church planting team that's going to be planting a church on the coast in a city called Kaip. It's the provincial capital. Let me show you a quick video that gives you a little bit of a view of the city and the people who are there.
Kaip is a provincial capital on Cambodia's southern coast. Once a glamorous resort for Cambodia's rich and famous, Kaip still bears the scars of the Khmer Rouge years and is still recovering from decades of war and violence. 95% of the Cambodian population of Kaip is Buddhist. The town is made up of fishermen, farmers, children, teenagers, and adults, almost all of whom have never had the chance to know Jesus. But imagine if that could change. There has never been an Assemblies of God church in the entire province of Kaip. But today, a church planting team is being formed to open this new area to the kingdom of God. With your partnership and support, Imagine what God can do in Guype.
We're excited about this project, but we need your help to do it. We need your prayers and your support. This area also has a large Muslim population. Literally, you go from the town center in one direction, you go past, within a few hundred yards, you go past Buddhist temples, a few hundred yards in the other direction, Muslim mosques. We need your help. We need your prayers. God's Spirit moves when God's people pray. And nothing is going to happen there without God's Spirit moving. We need a breakthrough there. So please pray with us on that. Make sure you pick up one of our prayer cards in the back before you leave on the table out there, or get one from my wife or I. Also out there, you're going to see some pop-up banners. On there is a QR code, if you know what those are. If you scan that, it's going to take you to our website, and you can find all kinds of information about Cambodia, more details about the ministry we've been involved in over the years. You can even find recipes for Cambodian food if you want it on that website. So check that out. There's some good things there. But one of the things that really makes us excited about this project of planning this new church is that it feels like almost like starting over in a good way. It's kind of getting back to basics. This is why we got into missions in the first place, was to take the gospel to places it's never been. And it's not that we haven't been doing that over the last 20-some years. We have, but this is getting up and going to a new place. I mean, it's exciting. We're really excited about it because it's responding to God's call again, in a new way. And really, how we respond to God's call is an important thing for every single one of us, not just missionaries, not just pastors, but all of us, because all of us have been called. So I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about God's call. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to be looking at the book of Genesis, Jonah. Jonah and Genesis are far apart, but we're going to be looking at Jonah. Jonah is an interesting character in the Bible. He's only mentioned one time outside of the book that bears his name, and that's just briefly in 2 Kings. It mentions him in 2 Kings chapter 14, that he had given a prophecy to the king of the northern kingdom of Israel about that he would recover some lands that had been lost in the past. And it comes to pass, he recovers those lands. And so he's looked on favorably by the governments of the time, because he's not a prophet who's coming in saying, everything's going to be bad for you because you've sinned. He came in and he said, hey, good things are going to happen, and good things did happen. And so he's sitting pretty comfortably, and he lives just on the border between the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And we come to chapter 1, verse 1 of Jonah, the book of Jonah, and it says, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the son of Amittai, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. Now, Nineveh was a great city at the time. It wasn't yet the capital of the Assyrian Empire. It would eventually become that. But it was already a powerful nation. It was already known for its brutality, its violence. If they were coming to invade your city, you could pretty much kiss your life as you knew it goodbye. Because they would come in, they would kill most of the people, and anybody who survived, they would forcibly take them out of the city, bring people from other areas they'd conquered to resettle where you were, and force you to be a refugee in those other areas. So your life was over. I mean, it was done if they were coming after you. And that's just the beginning of the things they would do, and the violence and the wickedness and evil that were there. So much so that it comes to a point where God says, I've got to destroy them. It's gotten so bad. The only other place I remember this happening in the Bible off the top of my head is Sodom and Gomorrah. So think of it. This is how wicked these places are. And God tells Jonah, I want you to go there and call out to them the word I'm going to give you. And so Jonah says, okay, and he gets up and he goes to the coast to Joppa, gets on a boat, and goes in the exact opposite direction, right? He doesn't go towards Nineveh at all. Nineveh's up to the northeast. Jonah goes as far west as he can possibly go. He goes to Joppa, finds a ship, a trading ship that sails on the Mediterranean Sea, and says, where are you guys going? They say, Tarshish. Tarshish is way over by Spain. He says, great, I want to go with you. I'm getting on here, and they take off for Tarshish. Now, you guys know the story. God sends a storm to come up on the sea because of this, and this boat is caught in the midst of this storm. And this is a major storm. This isn't anything small. This is a big, big storm. In fact, you've got to remember, these are professional sailors, and it's so severe, this storm is so severe, that they're convinced it's a God behind it. They're saying it's obviously supernatural, it's so severe. And so they all start calling out to their gods. Now, I love this part of the story because it reminds me of the Cambodian people. These sailors are just like Cambodians. Cambodians are Buddhist, but they're also very animistic in a lot of the things they do. And animistic society, they believe that there are spirits that live in different rocks and trees and areas, and that they basically live in fear of what those spirits will do to them if they don't properly honor those spirits or appease them. And so they'll go to different places, offer sacrifices. If they're traveling somewhere, they'll stop at different shrines to offer incense or food to that spirit of that area to appease it so that they aren't harmed. And that's what these sailors do. The storm comes up. It's obvious it's a supernatural event. And so they start all calling out to their gods for mercy to try to figure out why this storm is happening. But nothing happens. Nothing's changing. They're not getting any answers. So the captain of the ship says, well, let's cast lots to see which person can give us the answer, which god it is that we're dealing with here. And so they cast lots, and the lot falls to Jonah. And they know who Jonah is. At least they know that he's running from God. Apparently, he had told them he was running from his God when he got on the ship. And so they come to him, they say, Jonah, hey, we know you're running from a God and all, but we're not real clear on who that is. I think they were hoping it would be like, oh, I serve the God of Joppa, and maybe the farther away we get away from Joppa, the less the storm will be, that sort of a thing. Something that they could outrun, something that could get away from the God's territory. And they say, so we're not real sure who it is you serve. Who is this God you're running from? He says, well, I serve the God who created all the heavens, all the earth, all the skies, all the seas. That's the God I serve. And they're kind of like, well, wait a minute. You serve who? And you got on our boat to run from him? Well, Jonah, what do we do? How do we stop this? He said, well, you can throw me overboard. Now, again, I love these sailors because even they're like, wait a minute, even we know you aren't supposed to kill people, right? And so they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to throw you overboard. And so they try to row him to shore. I mean, do you get what's happening here? These guys, these heathen sailors are putting their own lives at risk to try to save this guy who has had no concern for them and put them at risk in the first place. And they're going out of their way to try to save him. But they can't make it to shore. They can't do it. So they end up going back to the boat, and they're like, God, we tried. You know, God, we tried to save him. We tried any other way. We couldn't get there. So God, don't hold this against us. And they take him and they throw him overboard. And immediately the storm stops. Now, you might be, if you're in the midst of a storm that is so severe you're convinced it's supernatural, you might be afraid. But I guarantee you, if you did something like that and all of a sudden it stops, now you're really terrified. Because now it's not just, this might be God. Now it's, this is God. And these sailors are so, overcome by this whole thing that it says that in verse 16, it says, then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. They basically turned it around. They turned their lives around. They said, we're not serving these various gods anymore. We're making vows to this God who's over all things. The God of Jonah, that's the God we're going to serve. Meanwhile, Jonah's treading water next to the boat, and they kind of look over, and they're just about, hey, Jonah, and all of a sudden this fish comes up and swallows him. Now, I grew up watching Disney cartoons and things, and any of you ever see Pinocchio? Remember Pinocchio, a couple of you? Yeah, and there's a scene where Pinocchio gets swallowed by a whale, and he goes in, and he's in the whale's belly, and it's this big cavernous room, and there's a little shack floating there with a porch on, and Geppetto's in there fishing.